All right, well, I've got 7:01, so I am calling this meeting of the Barrington Town Council to order. Present this evening are Vice President Michael Carroll, the President, that's myself, Vice President Weymouth, Councilor Steve Boyajian, Councilor Jacob Breyer, Councilor Joy Hearn. We also have our Town Manager, Jim Cunha, our Clerk, Meredith DeSisto, and our Town Solicitor, Mike Ursillo, as well as the department heads of the town present. Before we begin, this is a little unusual. Obviously, this is the first time we've, as a town council, done a video meeting, or I should say an online meeting. Our meetings are broadcast on television, but we're usually together. And because of the circumstances, we're apart. And I just wanted to kind of check in with everybody and ask you, Kate, how are you doing?
So, Mike, excuse me, Kate, I just need to interrupt. At the beginning of the meeting, Mike, you need to read off the dial-in number.
Okay.
Again, for those who are dialing in so that they can hear that.
Sure. So anyone who wants to dial in, it's 1-929-205-6099. That's 929-205-6099. The meeting ID is 760-741-7973. Anything else, Mike?
No, sorry to interrupt, though.
That's okay. So, Kate, everything's going okay?
Yeah, I'm missing being able to see my son and my granddaughter, who's in Portland. And I have to tell you, I've driven into Barrington to go to Shaw's and to the bank. And for the first time in my life, I mean, I grew up in this town, the first time in my life, I felt vulnerable. And it had solely to do with my age, because I'm 68, and that means I'm in the risk. But it was a daunting feeling, I have to say.
Yeah.
But so far, so good. My family's good. Going a little crazy, but as we all are. And we have better days than others, but it's good to see you all.
Steve Boyajian, you've got little ones at home, and they're doing okay, or are they ready to run you out?
No, so they're doing fine. It's funny, Sarah's a teacher at a school in Providence, so between the three of them, there are 3 classrooms in my living room at once, and then the other day I had a hearing, so it was actually 3 classrooms in a courtroom, all in my living room. So it's a different experience, not one I want to repeat, that's for sure.
And Jacob, how about yourself?
Fortunately, my wife and I outnumber our son, so we've been getting by okay. But it's times like this you hear people talk about how you really see a community be able to come together, and that's been so evident here. It's really nice to see how many people are stepping up to help neighbors, to give ideas, and to everybody's kind of doing what they can to help everybody else get through it. And that's one of the things that makes our town great.
Right. Joy, how about yourself?
Good. We're well here. Our daughter's an ER nurse at Miriam, so she is telling, it's tough out there. I have to agree with Jacob. I think the town is, really coming together and really understanding the seriousness of this all and coming together as a community. So proud to be a, resident and a representative of it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I do think that we're all a little bit scared. I think we're concerned about our families and concerned about our neighbors too. This idea that, we might be the cause of someone getting sick, so that's keeping us all safe, but keeping us all inside. But I do think the folks in Barrington should be reassured. We have such an outstanding staff. Our fire chief has been our chief for 17 years, and he was a chief in East Providence for 9 years before that. He's our EMA director, and he commands a fire department that has 100% EMT, cardiac care level EMTs. Every one of them. There's not a single, quote unquote firefighter that's the only thing they do, including himself. He's got EMT #1 badge. Our police chief has 34 years on the Barrington Police Department. He was a lead instructor of the Rhode Island Municipal Police Academy. We have an accredited police force, and that is not the universal case around the state. We've worked hard to get accreditation and to maintain it. Our DPW director has been with us 13 years. He's a professional engineer, and his folks work hard all day, but they're ready to drop what they're doing when a storm comes, to react and get plowing so they can be ready for Christmas Day, and then all of a sudden the snowstorm hits and they've got to get out there on the roads to make us all safe. We're full of really high quality people who are crewing this ship during this really tough time, and led by our town manager, Jim Cunha, who is actually a captain, a retired Navy captain, 35 years in the Navy. And he was also the public safety director for 14 naval installations, law enforcement, fire, EMS, emergency management. He was the Navy's anti-terrorism force protection director. What I'm trying to get across is that we are in as good shape as you could be going into a crisis. We've got the best people working for us, all the department heads. But even with that, they can't do it alone, and we're all going to have to pitch in. And I agree with my colleagues. People have been doing it. They've been volunteering, delivering food, calling into the number and offering their services, and checking on their neighbors as best they can. So we're going to get through this. I think we'll get through this as a community, and because we're a community, we'll get through this. I guess we could start really the meeting, and I'd ask our town manager, Jim Cunha, to take us through the announcements.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to kind of go over the restrictions in broad terms in accordance with the executive order that's been put out. And I can tell you that 99% of our citizenry are being compliant, but there's that 1% that hasn't gotten it yet, and we'll continue. Dino and his team, the chief and his team, are pushing hard to get people into compliance. There's certainly been no fines handed out, but there's been a lot of guidance given to people. So residents are required to stay home with the following exceptions. They can travel to work if they are unable to work from home. They can travel for medical treatment or necessary shopping, such as food, medicine, or gas, and they can exercise. There's nothing that's preventing them from getting outside, and especially on a day like today, they are required to keep a 6 foot, I refer to as physical distancing. I think we should be socially connected, but physically distanced. So I've changed the term up a little bit. But in addition, all the DEM and the Barrington recreational facilities are closed. This was due to us trying to prevent people not being compliant with the restrictions put on them. So we're also recommending that everyone wears face masks when they are out in public. That comes from the Rhode Island Department of Health as well as the CDC. It's not a requirement, but it is recommended. In addition, you see a lot of people wearing gloves. And what they'll tell you is gloves are only as good as the first time you touch something, then they're contaminated. Probably better off just washing your hands more frequently than using gloves, because a glove will transfer the infection from one surface to another just as easily as dirty hands would. With that said, I'd like to get into a couple more announcements. There's been a change in the trash collection. Due to employment issues or issues with sick employees at MEGA, their workforce has been depleted. And so with all the communities they work for, They are no longer picking up yard waste, and they're no longer doing bulk pickup. We are hopefully going to continue with our weekly trash pickup and recycling in that order. It may come to pass that we do recycling every other week, but at this point, we're picking up trash and recycling every week. Yard waste, clippings, and leaves can be brought to the recycling center if people want to get rid of them, or they can just hold them until this collection start again. In addition, for those doing their annual cleanups, until May 15th, DPW will be shredding or chipping large branches and limbs. All you need to do is call DPW, and they will come by and get rid of that stuff for you. Just put it by the side of the road. We are working hard on the census. We're asking people to get online. It's easy to do. It takes about 5 minutes. And obviously, it's of significant importance to our state and our community. So we are encouraging people to do that. The Committee on Appropriations schedule is online. They are meeting every Tuesday evening, and we'll be doing it via Zoom as we have the last 2 weeks. At this point, we'll be discussing the FTM later, but it appears that we will not be able to conduct the FTM on schedule. And the governor and her legal team and the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns are working through what statutory requirements need to be met and how we might be able to go forward if we can't get an FTM done in time. April 24th is Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. And as all communities are asked, we'll be flying the Armenian flag from the town hall flagpole on that day in remembrance of that tragedy. Dog licenses are due by April 30th. So if you have your dog, please come by, drop off in our mailbox by the finance office, the license and the payment, and we'll get it out to you. We're still looking for poll workers for the 2020 elections. They need to be trained. So please, if you're interested in working the elections. Speaking of which, the presidential preference primary is now on June 2nd, and the last day to register for that is on Sunday, May 3rd at the police station. You can do it via dispatch at the police station. And then Monday, May 4th is the last day to disaffiliate if you have a particular party and you care to vote with another party on the primary. The mail ballot applications for that presidential preference primary is due on Tuesday, June 2nd. I'm sorry, for that election on June 2nd. The last day to apply for a mail ballot is Tuesday, May 12th. So with all those dates in mind, that's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. The next group of items on our agenda is what we call the consent agenda. These are items that are usually... Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
I have an announcement as well.
Sure.
Because of the coronavirus, both the planned Earth Day and the planned Arbor Day celebrations have been canceled. However, families and individuals can still celebrate Earth Day, which is on April 22nd. It's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Families can celebrate by cleaning up trash from any of the number of places across town that need attention. And Arbor Day is April 24th. And it's recommended to plant a tree. But the communal celebrations have been canceled. Hopefully we can do them next year.
Great.
Thank you.
So the consent agenda are non-controversial items usually passed as a single motion. But if any member of the council or any member would like to have any member of the audience would like to have a separate discussion on an item, then they can let me know and we will take that item out, consider the remaining items as a package, and then get to that individual item. Is there anyone from the council who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Yes. I'd like to, this is Kate. I'd like to take out the minutes, number 6, and I might as well take out 7, the monthly department reports.
Okay. Councillor Boyajin? Anything?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Breyer, anything?
Nothing for me.
Councillor Hearn, anything?
Nothing for me.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'm sorry. Would anyone from the audience like to remove anything from the consent agenda to discuss separately? I want to give you a second because this is an unusual situation. I see some folks are muted, and in case they wanted to, just remember to unmute yourself if you want to say something. Okay. Seeing none, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of items 6 and 7 as presented?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Kate Weymouth, second by Joy Hearn. I'm going to do this by roll call. So, Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Boyajin,
Aye.
Councillor Breyer,
Aye.
Councillor Hearn,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Okay, so the consent agenda passes with those. The first item for separate consideration is the minutes, and that was Kate.
I need to abstain from the February 13th minutes as well as, or recuse because I wasn't present. And March 14th, the emergency meeting.
Okay, those would be abstentions, not recusals. Unless you have a conflict, it's a recusal, but you can abstain because you weren't present.
Okay.
For those. Okay. Any changes to the minutes? Any other council member? Okay. Seeing none, let's do it as you said, February 13, and what was the other one?
March 14.
March 14. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of March 2nd and March 4th as presented?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Motion made by Councilor Breyer and seconded by, who will second?
Second.
By Councilor Hearn. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Boyajin,
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Aye.
Councilor Hearn,
Aye.
and I vote aye. It carries unanimously. And for the minutes of the February 13th meeting and the March 14 meeting, do I hear a motion to approve those as presented?
So moved.
A motion by
Second.
Councilor Boyajin and seconded by Councilor Hearn. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote? You have
Abstain.
Councilor Boyajin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Aye.
Councilor Hearn,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So that carries 4-0 to 1 abstention, no opposition. Next item is the monthly reports. That's item 7, and that was also, Kate, you asked about those.
Did we do the 14th, March 14th?
We did those together. The 13th, February 13 and 14, we.
Okay, I'm sorry. I missed that. Okay. Yes, I'd like to take out the library. I don't know if the librarian is present.
Yes, she is.
I am. I'm here.
Okay. First, I wanted to point out that David Demick, who's the IT person at the library, is beginning a new position at the Ocean State Libraries, which is wonderful for him. I just wanted to commend him. He did a fabulous job at the library. I gave 2 presentations on our trip to New Zealand, and I never would have been able to do that without his assistance. So I just wanted to point that out. But I also know that he was directly involved with the new program to digitize videos, etc. And I was just wondering if the world ever goes back to normal, are you going to continue to offer that service?
So first, Kate, I'd like to thank you for your commendation for David. I will pass it along to him. We are very happy for him, but we are very sad for us. Although technically he still works for us because everyone in the consortium works for their member libraries. So we'll have 1/48 of him, I think. As far as video transfers, it is our intention to continue that. And we have hired a young man from Tiverton who is extremely capable. And once, it's kind of an odd thing to hire someone in this virtual world, but we did. And once he can actually get into the building, he will be get himself up to speed. We're very confident about that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate, did you have any other questions?
Not on the library, no.
Okay. Anyone else on the library? Okay, Kate, did you have any other concerns in the report?
Yes, the Department of Public Works.
Right.
I just wanted to make note that 4 trees were removed and 0 trees were planted.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it. I have something on the planning.
Okay.
The planner's report. I think, I know that a lot of people have been very concerned about the proposed drive-through facility at Starbucks. And I just wanted to note that the planning board on March 3rd unanimously directed staff to draft a motion that would include a recommendation against approval of the proposed drive-through facility. And I think that will, I think the public might be really interested in that, to know that. Other than that, I don't have anything.
Okay. Councillor Boyajian, did you have anything you wanted to address in the reports?
No.
Okay. Councillor Breyer.
Yes, in the police report. And that was 2 items. One, I had been, and both of these were actually addressed by the town manager in advance, but I thought they were of note for the public. And it's, one is I was curious what the SRO was doing with schools closed, and it works out that he's filling in for somebody who's out on leave, so it helps with overtime costs, which is nice. And the other was having heard from a few constituents concern with people being told to stay home, and home isn't always the safest place for people, and wanting to know if we could be proactive on any challenging situations, just to make sure that everybody is safe wherever it is they are. And I saw actually today a tweet from the police department's Twitter handle about the Women's Resource Center. And I was just wondering if there are any other initiatives that can be shared or discussed to make sure that folks know that the police are looking out for them.
I think the chief that's still on has a little bit more on that.
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I spoke with our domestic violence advocate today. Each police department in the state has an advocate assigned most, I should say, not all, but we do have an advocate, which is a good thing for both the domestic violence incidents and sexual assault incidents. I spoke with her today. There's a lot of, I have a full sheet here of the things we're doing. I'll try to be as brief as possible. But whenever there's an offense or any type of incident involving a domestic issue, even if there's not an arrest, our advocate reaches out to the victim or the reporting person. We're also in touch because of the crisis with the courts. If anyone at all calls the court for a restraining order or no contact order or anything of that nature, even if there is no arrest, they are contacting us as well. She does follow up, our advocate follows up with people that she's met through various cases in the past. So she is readily available 24/7. Most of them have a contact for her that when they call her office, that goes right to her cell phone. She's able to meet and talk with any person in distress within 24 hours normally of any incident. She's in contact with the reporting party. I'm just reading a little bit more here. And she's on a lot of the websites. BH Link is also on our website, plus our social media sites. And she's doing quite a bit. And like I said, I don't know what, as far as, I think someone had mentioned knocking on doors, and we would never do that from a safety standpoint. She said, unless summoned to the residence for police assistance, it is not recommended to make routine follow-up via actual knocking on the door by a police officer for safety reasons. I don't know if there's anything else, Jacob, that I could also send a copy to the council of the full page here that I have of everything we're trying to do.
No, I think it's, sorry, for me, it's reassuring knowing that it is something that, you know, the department has an advocate in place, and it's something that's top of mind is good, and that's going to be reassuring for folks. So thank you.
Yeah, and that advocate, Jacob, she's actually excellent. She came on board last summer, and she definitely is in touch with the reporting party or the victim, whatever, however you want to term them, quite often, and she's excellent.
Thank you.
Other than the police report, Councilor Breyer, do you have any other questions or concerns about the reports?
Yep.
Councilor Hearn, any questions or concerns about the monthly reports?
No, I'm set.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the monthly department reports as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Kate Weymouth and seconded by Joy Hearn. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Boyajian?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer?
Aye.
Councilor Hearn?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you. That is the consent agenda. The next item on our agenda is the Bristol County Water Authority monthly report, and we have Chairman Klepper here. Mr. Klepper, are you prepared to give a short report?
Did you get copies of the report?
You did.
It was a very short meeting. We took care of business. The principal item was taking an eminent domain step in East Providence because the people we've been trying to get in touch with for an important easement, this is plotting the transmission line, they hadn't responded to us. So this is a move that is letting them know we're serious, we need to act on this, and we took this quick action. Actually, I signed these papers today and got them over to the new Secretary Treasurer, George Champlin, and they'll be turned back to our attorney, Joe Keogh, so he can process those. Other than that, we stepped out of it quickly, and I wish you well. We didn't have a Zoom meeting. We had by telephone, which is a pain in the tail, but nonetheless, it went quick, and I'm hoping yours will go quickly as well.
Thank you.
Any questions I can answer?
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have no interviews and appointments this evening, so the next item on our agenda is public comment. This is a 2-minute statement, an agenda item for members of the public to speak regarding a topic that is not already on the agenda. If you'd like to speak, please indicate you'd like to speak by raising your hand, and I will be watching the video. If I don't see the video, I will then ask if anyone who is calling in by phone or not showing on video would like to speak. And then I'd ask you to state your name for the name and address for the record. Would anyone from the public like to be heard? Yes, Mr. Block.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening, everybody. It's my first time doing a public meeting online as well. You're doing a great job so far. I just wanted to raise a couple of issues that directly are related to the coronavirus and finances. I have not been privy to any of your previous meetings, so I may be running over territory you've already been over. But very quickly, there are a lot of businesses and a lot of business owners who live in Barrington. There are people living here in Barrington who are employees of IGT who've been furloughed for 8 weeks. They've lost essentially 15% of their annual income. The state has a gigantic budget deficit that's going to be much worse because our tax revenues are declining and our casinos are shut down, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it's a stretch to assume that state aid is going to be hard to come by this year. I also believe very, very strongly as a small business owner myself that there are going to be a lot of people, business owners and just straight up employees who are going to be under a lot of financial pressure. At the same time, the town is going to be under a lot of pressure and will feel that pressure in terms of wanting to raise property taxes or needing to raise property taxes. So that brings up a little bit of tension, and I wanted to just bring it up and make some suggestions. One would be, it would be very helpful and comforting for people in very tough economic times to know that the municipality will take a position that they will not attempt to dispossess people who are unable to pay their property taxes because of coronavirus related issues. I think there's going to be a lot of people under a lot of stress. Our taxes are not cheap here, and it's not necessarily a means or a demographic issue in terms of what your income is, because people who are living in homes that pay $20,000, $30,000 a year in property taxes are going to be as unable to make those payments as somebody who lives in a house that owes $5,000 if your revenues drop to nothing. So I think it's a real problem. We'll probably start to see it at the end of this quarter. And it's something that I think the town should really think about because it's a pretty terrifying prospect to have to choose between keeping your house or feeding people. So that's just one issue that I'd like to bring up. The other one is related to this. And that really revolves around the idea where we're going to lose our state aid. And again, supposition on my part, but I think it's realistic given the state's dire straits and also the challenges with at best deferred payments from some taxpayers here. At the end of this coming quarter, I suspect, will begin to feel the pinch economically. By we, I mean the town of Barrington. And I just wanted to float the idea or mention it, and you may already be thinking along these lines. We may very well be in a situation where we have to reduce expenses, perhaps dramatically, assuming that things stretch out and that potentially we enter recession, that sort of things. We have a pretty high burn rate here, and I can just foresee a problem where our revenues are not going to be up to where our expenses are going to be. So I just wanted to get those two ideas out to you. It wouldn't shock me at all if you've already talked about them before. I just felt very strongly about bringing them up here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? Anyone who's muted, this is your chance to be heard. I can't see all of our guests. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to enact on renaming the ad hoc recreational trail committee. And this, I believe, is Councilor Boyajian's initiative.
Sure, thank you. So about, I want to say it was 2 years ago, we formed the Trail Committee. Its job and charge was to implement a particular strategy and goal of the comprehensive plan. And they've taken steps to do that. You might recall, I think it was 2 months ago, we approved trail standards for the town. If you read the comprehensive plan, generally the idea is to link all of our open spaces together to the extent possible with usable and convenient trails. We've taken steps both in planning and in implementation. We've actually spent some time out in the woods clearing and doing things of that nature. But in discussions with the group, I think that they're capable of taking on more. And we have the right people at the table, it seemed to me, to rekindle something that was disbanded, I think, in 2012, which was we had an ad hoc open space committee. So my proposal, and you have it in the charge in front of you, which was actually cribbed from the Open Space Committee's plan back in 2011, is to form a permanent committee, the Open Space Committee in Barrington, to use the existing members of the Trail Committee to fill those roles for the time being until any of them resign and we do reappointments, and expand their charge to look at open space matters in general. A lot of the different pieces of the comprehensive plan have committees that are in charge of those things, but open space is not one of them. We have Parks and Rec that tends to manage recreational parks. We have Conservation Commission that looks after conservation land. No one is taking open space as a goal on itself and taking that ball and carrying it. And so I thought, with the membership that we have, which includes representatives from the Land Trust, from the Conservation Commission, representatives from the Harbor Commission that headed the Rights of Way project, and others, that this was an opportunity, I think, to form a permanent committee that can do something that's really important. The reason I think it's a pressing matter is, and I've said this before at meetings, that if you look at the open space plan that was adopted in 2011, at the back of it, there's a map. And it maps out the open space in town, and both protected and unprotected. If you look at the unprotected parcels, I want to say out of the dozen or so significant parcels, as we sit here today, 5 of them have fallen in one of 2 columns, which is either they've been developed or they've been protected. And I think the race is on. We know how little open space is left in Barrington, that the remainder within the next decade or so is going to fall into one of those 2 columns. And I want it to be open space. And you know that the voters, well, at least last year at the financial town meeting, certainly felt the same way about Lot 3A. So that's the reason behind it. Happy to discuss the Trail Committee's work. I will note one change, which is in the prior formulation of the membership, there was not a member of Energy and Resiliency. For 2 reasons, I think that's a good idea. The first is practical, which is that Magnus Thorson, who acts as the chairman of the Trail Committee, stepped down from Conservation and joined Energy. And he is incredibly energetic and has been pushing this very hard, and I'd hate to lose him. The second is that for resiliency purposes, and if you speak with various organizations about this, including the Nature Conservancy, a big priority for land acquisition needs to be preparation for inland wetland migration, especially in a place like Barrington that is already low-lying. As seas rise, what is dry land today is your wetland tomorrow. And so for that reason, I think a member of the Resiliency Committee would be important. Wetlands impound water in the case of floods, hurricanes, etc. I think that should all be part of our planning in terms of open space acquisition. So I don't know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to talk about the committee's work if you do, but.
Yes, Vice President Wayman.
At our last meeting, we appointed a citizen at large to this committee. And I think it sounds as if she will be a very valuable member of the committee. And I'm just wondering if I think we ought to keep citizens, and maybe even expand it to more than one. I don't know how anyone feels about that, but I think it's important to involve members of the community as well as administrative people.
Okay, Council Breyer.
Yes, I had a similar either comment, suggestion, concern, however it's categorized, but I was unable to tell from reading this exactly what the composition of the committee is. Was it limited to these bullets, or these bullets are part of but not necessarily exhaustive of the membership? I think the idea for changing this to an open space committee is a good plan. I'd like to see a couple spots, probably 2 spots at least, for members of the general public who are not necessarily representing another committee's interests, but their sole focus is open space.
Steve Boyajian, does the bullets represent with the exception of the energy and resilience, there is currently a member from each of those, is that correct?
That's correct, yep. And I don't think there's any reason to close off membership to those members. I think the point of that is that it's essential to have those members there because between them, they represent pretty much all the open space in Barrington. And I want buy-in and dedication from each of these bodies. And we've seen that, for example, with Dr. Larish from the Land Trust or TR from Parks and Rec, that they're very active and very dedicated to this. I think members of the public, as many as want to be involved, like other committees, we add to them all the time when we think there's an opportunity to bring in someone who's talented and dedicated. And of course, we'll always use the help, especially in July when we're clearing poison ivy.
We'll get goats.
So if we were to add 2 members of the public to the composition, call them at-large members, 2 members of the public at large, that would include Ms. Reese, I believe is her name, from last month, who we just appointed. And then an additional member, and if we feel there are more, we could always amend it. Does that make sense to everyone?
Makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. For her.
I'm fine with the membership component. Are we talking about the charge as well, or we're waiting for the membership component to be done and then move on to the charge language?
I think it sounds like we're all set with the membership component and reach consensus. We'll do a vote on that probably as a package. But what's your concern about the?
So in terms of the charge piece, we talked about for the past couple months just the DPW increasing cost as we acquire new spaces to take care of. And I would just like to add somewhere in the charge a fiscal oversight or a DPW component to how these figure for maintenance. I know some nature conservancies put in their acquisition cost a contained dollar amount for annual upkeep. And I just think we should at this point start to, really understand the cost of acquiring these, the continuing cost.
if nobody has a suggestion for that, I can make a suggestion. If you look at the charge, the second sentence begins, the Open Space Committee shall make recommendations for future acquisitions. And we could add, including future costs associated with the acquisition. Actually, it probably makes sense to put that after of open
Yeah,
space.
maintenance cost of acquisition. Yeah,
Future.
maintenance cost of acquisitions.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the charter? I mean, the charge, excuse me. Okay, so I will, I'll propose that we amend the charge here, and I'll make a motion to rename the ad hoc Recreational Trail Link Committee to the Open Space Committee, add a representative of the Resilience and Energy Committee, and include 2 members of the public at large, and accept the amended charge as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I want to be clear, Mary, so that you've got it. The charge would stay the same for the first sentence, and then the second sentence could read, the Open Space Committee shall make recommendations for future acquisitions of open space partials, comma, including future maintenance costs of such acquisitions, comma.
Okay.
We'll just continue as it was. Okay, so I've made the motion, and I believe, Kate, you seconded it. Any further discussion? Okay. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Boyajian?
Aye.
Councillor Breyer?
Aye.
Councillor Hearn?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item is item 16, to discuss and act on electric vehicle charging station at Cove Park. Yes. And I believe our town planner has prepared a memo on that. Did you want to just run through the high points on that, Phil?
Oh, sure. This would be establishing charging stations at electric vehicles, charging stations at Police Cove Park in the parking lot, where we have 36 parking spaces. It would be 2 level 2 EV charging units there that could charge up to 4 cars. So it would actually take 5 spaces because they have to restripe it in accordance with state requirements. You kind of lose 1 space. You'd also have to dedicate them for EV electric vehicles only. That would probably be an ordinance change later. All of the funding for this piece of this project would come from the state Electrify Rhode Island program, $30,000, because they view this as a commuter lot, and National Grid would cover the rest of it, about $20,700. So looking for town council approval to utilize those spaces for the electric vehicle charging station. These are slower chargers that take a little bit more time. So it's thought that the commuter lot is a good one for people to park, take the bus in, let the car charge up over several hours and come back and you have a full charge. So that's the thought about this as being a good spot for the slower chargers.
Okay.
I think it's great.
Okay. Does someone want to make a motion?
I have a question.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
I hadn't realized that it was a commuter lot. But when I first was reviewing this, I know we were also looking at potentially putting charging stations at the PEC Center as well. And I wondered about the rationale for the faster ones at the PEC Center where people would tend to park for a longer time versus at Police Cove Park where I thought people might be using them to drive to the parking lot and then maybe use the bike path and come back. And it seemed if people are paying to charge, that having the high-speed ones there could make sense. And I would just wondered maybe for a little more explanation about the choice of where the high speed would go versus the longer term.
The funding is available for level 2 chargers only at commuter lots. And also this is thought of being a good spot because people do park. I know there's also the park and also the bike path. So you can get some charge there if you're going to use it for a short period of time as well. But as far as people who want to get a consistent place to go to charge the car in relationship to how they go to work, that was thought to be a good spot because people aren't doing that at town hall to leave it there for multiple hours at a time.
Yeah, and certainly the money being available for this use is also a very good reason. Yeah. Thank you.
Mike, I've never had to do this via video, so I'm not quite sure how to recuse myself, but I'm going to step away and finish this off, okay?
You can just mute your microphone.
I'll make a motion to approve Police Cove Park for electrical vehicle charging station location in the town of Barrington.
Okay, motion by Vice President Weymouth and seconded by Councilor Breyer. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Hearn, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Councilor Boyajian recuses from this, so the motion carries 4 no opposition and 1 recusal. The next item on our agenda is to discuss an act on authorizing funds from the Capital Reserve Energy Project account to install electric vehicle charging stations at the town hall. We've had a little preview of that. That is faster charging stations, but at the PEC Center. Phil, could you take us through the high points of that?
Yes, this site is also available for funding for a level 3 charging station, being a public property. This is a larger project because it's a lot more involved as far as they have to upgrade electrical, run conduit under the parking lot, doing other things, installing the station, which is more expensive. The total cost of this project is $200,000 roughly. The state of Rhode Island Electrify Rhode Island program would actually cover $80,000 of the cost. National Grid would cover about $76,000. The town itself would have to cover about $44,000. The request would be from the Capital Reserve account for energy projects. These level 3 stations can charge. They're really attractive. People will find them on their app as a level 3 station, which are very rare at this point in time. And they will go to the site and be able to get a pretty good charge within about 30 minutes. And so it's highly attractive. It should generate a decent amount of usage, especially over the next few years when electric vehicles are really supposed to really take off. Given what's happened now, it might be a little slower than that, but hopefully we'll see an anticipated real increase in the electric vehicle fleet. This is also thought to be a good spot in case the town was able to acquire an electric vehicle for its own use, including like the building official. And so they can plug in right there and maintain a charge so it can do business in the town electric vehicle. So the Resilience and Energy Committee actually recommended this site for an electric vehicle charging station, which I attached the minutes. And I don't know, do you have any questions? I kind of outlined it in the memo.
Any questions? Yes, Vice President Weymouth.
Does this Tesla vehicles can't use these, right?
I believe they need an adapter to be able to use them.
I do know that Magnus has been pushing for Tesla vehicles for the police department. And I would assume that if that were ever in the future, that there would be those charging stations set up at the
Public safety.
fire and safety building. But that was my only, that does mean that that vehicle would not be able to be purchased for the building inspector.
If I can jump in here, actually, there's 2 charging stations there, so there'd be 2 spaces. And we limit the amount of time because it's a quick charge that even people who are going to be working in town hall, like the town building official, they would only be able to park there to charge their vehicle. Then they'd have to move into another slot to open it up. And I would say that if we did get police Teslas and we could charge them there, then bringing a police car over and charging it at here until we can get one put at the police station would also make sense.
But Teslas can't charge on these, I don't think.
I think there's an adapter. That's what ChargePoint told me. There's an
Okay.
adapter, but I don't think Tesla drivers typically have that. You might have it on the town vehicle in case you had to charge there, but I think they tend to not have the adapter.
Okay.
Tesla owners. I think it's quite an expense.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to point that out.
Anyone else?
I'd just say I'm going to recuse myself again, Mike.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll make a motion to authorize up to $45,000 from the town's capital reserve energy project account for a level 3 electric vehicle charging station at Town Hall, subject to approval of the town's applications for funding from National Grid and the state's Electrify Rhode Island program.
Second.
Motion made by Vice President Weymouth and seconded by Councilor Hearn. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer?
Aye.
Councilor Hearn?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. And the motion carries 4-0 with Councilor Boyajian recusing and no opposition. Thank you. The next item on our agenda are our proposed charter changes. These we've talked about last month, and I'm wondering if anyone has anything that they wanted to add or change on any of these.
By that, do you mean that this is what they would be assuming we don't, or are we discussing? I thought we were going to discuss narrowing it down to a few.
We are going to do both, but
Okay.
so if you want to address the substance or identify the ones that you think are most important, either way. Councilor Hearn, yes.
I'm happy to start. So we had talked about the 10-2-8 removal of any firefighters who is not a member of the permanent fire department. And we had talked about the fact that we may down the road in some world need to retain the ability to have a volunteer fire department. And we kind of had talked at the last meeting about keeping that language, or there were some of us that thought keeping that language in the charter would be a good idea, and not to change that language, or not to take away that language. I guess it's 10-2-9, the control of provisions.
Yeah, I think, and actually looking back at the notes, Councilor Bayajian wanted that retained, and it was sent to the Board of Canvassers for their input. Did we hear from them?
I don't know if they met because
Yeah, they
we
probably didn't.
we canceled meetings.
Yeah.
Board of Canvassers has not met yet. Yes, Mary, sorry.
They did meet, and as long as they prefer not to clutter the ballot with, they want pertinent charter changes as opposed to a little bit here and a little bit there, or just to fix the language. So.
Okay.
Okay.
So my comment, I think, if I recall correctly, about this was not that I thought this was sort of a clerical issue. It's just, and I can never foresee it happening, but I don't want to guess what another town council might confront in the future. And I don't see any reason to constrain their power by saying that they can't disband a fire department. Again, nothing I ever foresee happening, but I never foresee having a town council meeting via Zoom because we can't get in the room either. So,
yeah. I think that this, I can't imagine this, but I also tend to think that it's probably pretty low on the list of priorities, even if you wanted to do it, because it's not, no one's looking at this and getting confused or anything like that. So I'm fine just sort of eliminating this one if that's the from consideration this time, if that's the will of the council.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so why don't we'll make a note of that, but I think we'll probably, I'm going to suggest we vote affirmatively for the ones that we want on the ballot rather than negatively for the ones that we don't want. We'll just make a note of that. I do think, even with the benefit of time, Section 7-1-15 was really a first time that I've seen. I think it's well written, and I think it's a lot clearer now. But this is not a substantive change so much as a clarification, I think. And if we wanted to make a substantive change, that's something entirely different.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if we do, let's say we only have one or two substantive changes, I think this would be a good one to clear it up. And I think Jim's rewriting of this is much, much clearer than the original verbose version. But I don't think it's substantive, and I think if it was going to be, that it really needs a larger kind of discussion around the whole FTM budget motion process versus just a tweak to the charter to change that part of it, because I think it goes kind of hand in hand with everything else.
How does everybody feel about this one?
I actually think it is a substantive change. in that we recognize that one of the motions that was made at the FTM, at the last FTM, should not have been made, or it was not legal to be made. And I think the clarification has brought that, that at least to our consciousness, and I think to the solicitors as well. So I view this as probably the most important change, frankly.
Right, I agree. I think it clarifies it enough that it will be simpler to tell which motions are valid and which motions aren't valid.
Right.
Anyone else on this one?
Well, I was just thinking we could blame Alan for that because he had to come in and pinch it and missed that was out of order last year. And he's left the meeting too, so we can really pin it on him.
That's right. Okay, well, it sounds like this is one that we do agree on and agree that is important. Any? Yes.
Go ahead. No.
Vice President Weymouth, anything?
It's not on this one.
Okay. Councilor Breyer.
Well, also not on the, I was going to bring up another potential change.
Okay, I'm looking here, we can make a motion on this one to add this to the general election ballot.
Okay. I'll make that motion.
Okay.
To add 7-1-15, limitations on motions for appropriations to the charter, to the ballot.
Second.
So let's just, I want to clarify, is your motion to prepare the proposed amended charter question section 7-1-15, limitations on motions for appropriations, for authorization and certification of the town council for placement on the general election ballot on November 3rd, 2020?
Yes.
And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Boyajian. The motion made by Vice President Weymouth. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Boyajian.
Aye.
Councilor Breyer.
Aye.
Councilor Hearn.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously with no opposition. Councilor Breyer, you had another one that you wanted to address.
Yes, I had brought it up at the last meeting, which was to discuss term limits as a potential charter change. And I had some language around it in how I think of it. And it would be limit consecutive terms on the council to 2 4-year terms. If no person files to run, a term limited councilor may retain their seat, and a council member would be eligible to run in the first election, whether regular or special election, following their last day in office.
Yes, Vice President Weymouth.
I strongly oppose this. Having served on the council for 16 years, this past election, when Councilman Breyer was elected, was the first one where I personally didn't have to twist someone's arm to run. In general, under normal circumstances, people are not anxious to run. And I think to put someone who has been in the position on hold that decision is made by whether or not somebody steps up to the plate, is asking a lot of someone who has put in years of service to the town council. So I am not interested. I will oppose this.
Councilor Boyajian, how do you feel?
My feeling is that I would say it probably took me 2 or 3 years to figure this job out. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who say that I haven't figured it out. And I'm appreciative of all of my colleagues, but especially Kate. And it's because every time something comes up and every question I have, she reminds me that she's seen something similar and we've had this problem before, and that, you know, it's a steady hand. And I think she's right that we struggle to recruit candidates. And the last thing I want to see happen is someone unqualified, essentially, you know, because they filed papers, is going to displace a candidate that the majority of voters might prefer. You know, this job is, it's a small town and it's well run, and we don't have the problems of every other town that we might read about in the newspaper. But the questions are complex. And if you get in by default because someone else who is willing to run is disqualified, I think that's bad for the town. So.
Councilor Hearn.
I'm a big proponent of term limits. I mean, I completely understand Kate's view on it, and I do think it's nice to have somebody that's got the steady hand. And I do think that it is tough in local politics to get people to run. So I kind of am with Kate on this to a certain degree, but not easily with Kate. So, that's kind of where I'm at this point.
My own view is that it is difficult to get folks for this particular job. We don't have some of the perks of folks in Congress. I understand those people who spend a lifetime in there. I don't think that this is a problem, that we have so many people who are in so long and not doing anything. Kate, you had to twist her arm to get her to run the last time, and I think it was because there really weren't candidates available at the time. So I don't think it is a problem, but I want to give Councilor Breyer an opportunity to respond to these points if he wants.
No, I don't think we need to take time on something that folks. I don't disagree with the reasons against it, and knowing that the strength of the opinions are what they are. I think it's an element of good government, but I also agree with the opinion that, maybe it solves a problem that we don't necessarily have. And so even though I see it as good general reform, it might not be applicable here.
Kate, you also wanted to address a different item on the list here. Which one was that?
I still would like more clarification why we're adding business and finance director. Only because government is not business. And much as our president would like to think that it is, I just don't really understand why we're going through all these semantic gyrations to change the finance director's title.
if I can address that, the reason that I recommended that change was because it reflects a position. It's always been that way. Most of the business transactions go through that office. Certainly, our current director has a lot of acumen in the business realm, but when it comes to the business operations of a town, and there are contracts that are being written and negotiated. There's rental fees for cell towers. There are business transactions that go on a regular basis, and they take place in that office. And so, I have made that change in her title to be more reflective of her responsibilities. Whether you feel that requires a charter change or not, I just thought it just made things more accurate. That's all.
Yes, Councilor Breyer.
Yeah, my view here is that as a position in town hall and as a job, that business and finance director absolutely makes sense. But I think similar to not wanting to remove the portion about the firefighters, not wanting to add something here that could further constrain a future town manager doing future hiring might completely restructure how things are and then require a charter change to have two different people serving the same functions that are currently filled by one. So while I think it's a title that makes sense for now, I don't know that I agree with changing the charter to match the current status.
And I'm fine with that. As I went through the charter, I was just looking for things that weren't reflective of what we operate now. And secondly, I can't imagine a future town manager ever wanting to do something different than I'm currently doing.
I can appreciate that.
Not a good town manager, anyway.
Yeah.
I think, what's in a name? It's. I think she can have that title without a change to the charter. In fact, I think the chief, in addition to all of his other titles, is also the sergeant. In addition to being a chief and wearing the rank of colonel, is a sergeant, is like the town sergeant or something.
Sergeant at arms.
Something like that, under the charter. So he may not know that, and maybe he's going to look for a raise now, but.
I was familiar with that. Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Take it to the COA.
Mr. President, if I can, when I went through this, I think one that the council might want to focus on is the second one, 2 TAC 1 TAC 1, which I think is very confusing as it's currently written, similar to the first one we looked at for appropriations. It has some old language about when we first staggered the council positions and some old dates in there that are no longer applicable. And I think this is one that clarifies how we actually do business today.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that one.
Yeah, I thought we did that.
I agree here, but would want it on the charter, on the ballot, only if we don't have more there, specifically because it's exactly what the Board of Canvassers asked us not to do. Even though, because I don't think anybody has trouble understanding how our terms currently work. It can be done in 2 sentences rather than, looks like maybe 18, but.
But this is just to set it in motion. I mean, it's obsolete from here on in, and I don't
agree.
I think it's sort of like the constables. You might as well. I don't know. I think we need to make the decision. The 5 of us rather than the Board of Canvassers. Sure. Especially if we are limiting it to 3 items. I mean, I think we're we have trauma from the time that we had we've got PTSD from the time we put 40 changes. I don't think 3 or 4 changes is a terrible burden for taxpayers to read and vote on.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I just think if we did have multiple others that are substance that would be actually changing practice and policy, I don't think this makes sense to be a 4th or 5th charter change. I would absolutely vote for this if we only have 2, maybe 3 others that are going to be on. So I'd like to come back to this is all I'm saying. I'm in favor of it. Just coming back.
Mike, I might point out on the list that 611, 613, 614 all refer to the finance director's title. So those 3 are going to go away automatically.
Oh, that's a good point.
If we agree to it.
But if you agree
that's my suggestion, but I don't know that we've.
Right. If you agree not to change the title that Jim has proposed, those 3 would go away.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think there was, it doesn't seem like the consensus was that we should be changing that title. I'm frankly indifferent to it myself, but I don't think it actually changes her duties or the title that appears on her cards or the plate in front of her desk. But I think for purposes of this, I'm fine with just limiting it to finance director. So that would, unless I'm seeing anybody else, I think that would eliminate those.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to 2-1-1, I appreciate the input from the Board of Canvassers, but sort of the point of doing a few a year is to clean things up. And at some point in the future, we'd like to have a charter that's not full of this kind of odd this language that is really not necessary, to clarify things as we're doing with the substantive one on or the important one that we've agreed on the limitations on motions for appropriations, or to just kind of clean ones up as we're talking about for 2-1-1. If we're not going to clean it up during an election, it's never going to get cleaned up. So I do think that one is important, but I agree with Councilor Breyer. It's just a question of prioritizing the top 3.
Well, I think that plus that language, plus the getting rid of the constables, we're talking about obsolete positions or methods. And I think both 2-1-1 and getting rid of constables clean up the charter.
Does that make sense to folks that we delete 10-1-4 and clean up and those be the 3?
That works for me.
So we're looking at 7-1, 10-1, 10-2-8. Sorry, 7-1, 2-1, 10-1.
Right.
Well, so we only have one other that we haven't discussed, which is 10-2-8.
I think that's the one that you originally discussed about the potential to possibly have another volunteer fire department down the road.
I thought that was 10-2-9.
It is
related.
If you have another volunteer fire department, this naturally flows.
You probably can't get rid of one without the other.
So we would have then, so we have three, right? 7-1, 2-1, 10-1.
Yep. I'm good with that.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that.
So we've already made the motion on 7-1-15. Do I hear a motion to prepare the proposed amended charter section 2-1-1 for authorization and certification of the town council for placement on the general election ballot on November 3rd, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Vice President Weymouth made the motion, and it was seconded by Councillor Hearn. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Boyajian, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Breyer?
Aye.
Councillor Hearn?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. So that was 2-1-1. And then do I hear a motion to prepare the proposed amended charter question deleting section 10-1-4 constables for authorization and certification from the town council for placement on the general election ballot on November 3rd, 2020?
So moved.
By President Weymouth and seconded by Councillor Hearn. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Boyajian?
Aye.
Councillor Breyer?
Aye.
Councillor Hearn?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. So we now have 3 items for our charter. Thank you. I think this is a good process to go through to sort of tidy it up over time, every 2 years, rather than trying to do it all in one. The next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on resolutions. And the first resolution is a ban on high-capacity magazines for firearms. Would anyone like to be heard on this?
I move to adopt the resolution as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Councillor Breyer, seconded by Vice President Weymouth. Any further discussion? Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Boyajian?
Aye.
Councillor Breyer?
Aye.
Councillor Hearn?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The resolution passes unanimously. The next resolution is to support legislation establishing the Ocean State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Fund. Anyone like to address this or make a motion?
I'll make a motion to support legislation to establish an Ocean State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Fund, and that the town clerk provide a copy of this resolution to the local and state representatives and state senators and to all municipalities in the state of Rhode Island.
Second.
Motion's been made by Vice President Weymouth, seconded by Councillor Boyajian. Councillor, is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Boyajian?
Aye.
Councillor Breyer?
Aye.
Councillor Hearn?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. The next resolution is to postpone the financial town meeting, which is currently scheduled for Wednesday, May 27th. And before we actually get to that, obviously as you read through it, you'll see the basis is the crisis that we're in right now. I asked our town manager what's the latest from the governor and the Department of Health on when the peak may be coming.
Yeah, they're working with several models. The current model shows us peaking on April 19th. That's out of the University of Washington. But working with Brown and Johns Hopkins and the University of Washington on a new model, it looks like the peak will be sometime in late April to mid-May. And if that's the peak, then we won't be out of this by May 27th. We'll be lucky if we're out of it by July 4th.
Would anyone else like to be heard on this? Councilor Breyer.
I'm curious, and I looked through and didn't see what happens if we don't have a financial town meeting by July 1st. And I know that there are probably state provisions governing that, but I didn't know if there was a place in this for that, just so it's, as we resolve to change this, it's done with the understanding of what business as usual will be going forward.
I think there's a couple of options that are out there, and there's some legal opinions on it, and I'll ask Mike to jump in, but there's one option is that we just continue the current budget into the new fiscal year with the current tax levy until a financial town meeting occurs and a new budget and tax levy are approved, and then we adjust the tax rate and basically retroactively build the budget. The second option, which I think is on less legal ground, is that the governor, through her executive powers, allow another sitting body to determine the budget vice the financial town meeting, which would probably be the town council. Mike Ursillo, do you have any inside baseball?
Nothing inside. All these options are still being discussed at other levels. My feeling right now would be that you would continue the present budget until such time as an FTM could be held, whether in person or virtually. Let's hope we don't have to go there.
And isn't it the case that in the absence of, I mean, you could imagine even without this crisis that the financial town meeting, for whatever reason, doesn't happen, or you don't get a budget because you can't get a quorum, or any of those things. Isn't it the case that by default you would continue with last year's budget?
That is in fact correct, Michael, yes.
Okay.
I have a concern. So we're talking about the financial town meeting, but we've also got the budget hearing. Do we need to make a decision about that as well?
I don't think that's necessary. And the reason I say that, first of all, that's in May, and so we could address that without much trouble in early May. The difference is for the financial town meeting, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably better to give some advance notice. The budget hearing is typically one of those hearings that the school committee and we come to, and then 2 or 3 other interested citizens come to. It just hasn't seen a lot of attention, so it's not that hard to rearrange. But I also think that the governor is going to probably address that at some point because those are coming up in several communities in May. So, yeah. Councilor Breyer.
I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the charter states that the budget hearing is simply 2 weeks prior to the financial town meeting. And so it's automatically covered by the postponement of the financial town meeting.
I guess that's right. There is also, I'm not sure about that. I think there is probably a requirement in state law as well for a budget hearing. But putting that aside, there is also a requirement in state law that we submit a budget for approval in advance of the financial town meeting. That's one of those things that I don't think I think the governor has to address reasonably soon, because I'm just not sure how we can get through that. We could, and the COA could continue to meet and do it in that way, but it doesn't. I don't know what she's going to do. I think it probably makes sense to postpone those as well, but I leave that to her because that's state law. Does anyone want to make this motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution postponing the financial town meeting originally scheduled for May 27th, 2020.
Second.
Motion made.
Before we vote on this, I just wanted to say, and I'm not saying we have a choice. This is a direct violation of the charter that sets the meeting date. And I just, think we ought to consider the gravity of that. Like I said, I'm not sure we have an alternative, but it's not something we ought to do lightly, and hope we never have to do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there, once you declare a state of emergency, aren't there exceptions to what a council or an executive board can do in terms of changing elections? Like the governor changed the election. Isn't the financial town meeting an election?
It contains an election, yeah, and so
Yeah.
it is an election. I suppose there could be litigation on this, but I don't particularly care. That there's not a judge in the state who would order us to attend a financial town meeting. So as much as I completely agree with Councillor Boyajian that this is a very serious move, I don't think there's really any option available to us. If it by chance happens that for whatever reason in the next 2 or 3 weeks, things get so much better that the state of emergency is lifted, we can certainly turn around on this, but that's just not going to happen. No one expects that, I don't think. Okay, so the motion was made by Vice President Weymouth and seconded by Councillor Breyer. Any further discussion? Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Boyajian, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Breyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Hearn, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, the next items on our agenda are to discuss and act on bids. And the first, both bids are for the fire department. So, Chief Bissett, I'd ask if you could take us through the uniforms bid, please.
I will. And the first thing I need to do, Mr. President, is as I'm sitting here, I read the memo to Mr. Cunha. And inadvertently, I put on there that it was a semi-annual basis. When actually, it is a biannual. It's every 2 years, not twice a year. So the actual comment I made to the manager, I said it was on a semi-annual basis. Once again, it's biannual. The bid for the uniforms was posted in the newspapers as required, and we only received one bid back, and it was from Mike and Wayne's Uniforms in Fairhaven, Mass. And it was for a total amount of $22,762.40. And once again, it'd be on a semi-annual basis. So we're just covering this year, 2020. You won't see it in 2022.
Okay. Any questions on that?
I got a question.
Yes.
So I noticed, I only thought of it because I saw that it's a contractually obligated purchase, and I was wondering if the number of uniforms was set with the old battalion rotation, and now are 4 sets needed, because I think with the current plan, you're never going to have more than 3 shifts in a week, and it might have been 4 in the past. If 4 is what the firefighters want and it's what makes sense, terrific. But if it's just a process because it's written 4 sets somewhere and it only needs to be 3 and that's all people would use, I just figured I'd ask. question.
I honestly don't know if it was in the collective bargaining agreement.
It is in the collective bargaining agreement, and we quite frankly never made the nexus between the change in shift schedule and the amount of uniforms. But my thought is, it's not so much as the cleaning as much as it is the wear and tear. And the firefighters are working just as many hours now as they were with the other shift schedule. So you would suspect that the uniforms would wear just the same.
Yeah, I just figured if they were going to end up with, an unused set just sitting in a closet until it gets replaced, save the money. But yeah, if they're all going to get worn, I have no issue with it at all. I just wanted to check in on it.
I'll make a motion. Oh, sorry.
No, go right ahead.
I'll make a motion to award the bid in the amount of $22,762 to Mike and Wayne's Uniforms, 163 Huddleston Avenue, Fairhaven, Mass. 02719, for 4 sets of station uniforms for all local 1774, required by contract biannually.
Second.
Motion made by Vice President Weymouth and seconded by Councillor Boyajian. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Boyajian.
Aye.
Councillor Breyer.
Aye.
Councillor Hearn.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. The next bid is for a new or a replacement. It is a new rescue. And Chief, if you can take us through that, please.
This is part of our capital apparatus account. I've always said that new rescue trucks are required in that 4 and 5 year range to keep a dependable fleet, and I'm continuing along with that. I set up an apparatus committee who went out and studied many of the vehicles that are being purchased today, and after many months, they come back and recommended a Lifeline emergency vehicle. They're sold by Specialty Vehicles of Plainville, Mass. I've watched the price of these vehicles grow each and every year, but they are specialty vehicles and they are designed for the needs of our community. So the cost would be $313,603, and I'm recommending that bid be given to Specialty Vehicles, Inc. of 18 Commerce Boulevard, Plainville, Mass.
Vice President Weymouth.
Chief, what happens to the old vehicle?
I will be getting rid of what we refer to as Rescue 3. That's a vehicle that's about 14 years old, 136,000 miles on it. We will first look around the state and see if someone needs a reserve vehicle that they could purchase from us. And if not, there are a federal national organization, they call it Gov Bids, Gov Deals. They would then advertise that vehicle and see what we could get back for it on a bid price purchase. It has some value, but it won't be, I don't want to say a number, but it's $5,000 or $6,000 probably is what we could get for that vehicle.
I was hoping you had an answer such as that. That somebody, I think the idea of it being an extra for some town is good.
I'll make it happen.
Whose vehicle is this? I mean, is it a Ford? Is it, when you say Lifeline vehicles, this isn't just a entirely custom, is it?
No, it's a Ford chassis, a Ford F550 chassis, and then the body is built individually. It's an aluminum body. It's designed the way our people work. We're basically close to being the same, but there's always something in a community that we do one way and another community may do just a little differently based on our needs. So they are actually built by specification by each community. That's what keeps the price up too. They're not just a cookie cutter.
Right. Okay.
Chief, did we receive bids for this?
This bid is through the HGAC ambulance contract. This is a contract that is probably around 20 years old. It actually came out of the state of Texas, but it's approved by all of our bidding, statewide and obviously locally. We use the same contract when we bought the ladder truck recently. So actually, we don't put this in a newspaper and say we want a certain truck made to these specifications. We go out and look at the vehicles, see what their specifications are, and we're allowed to change those specifications by a cost of actually 25% of that bid price to get some of the items exactly the way a community wants. But it is approved as far as bidding, so we're not required to go out and put a set of specifications out and then have someone lowball you with something that is so far out of what we're looking for. And we have a history with specialty vehicles, and that, when I first got to Barrington, that's what we had, 2 specialty vehicles. So we've had a history with them as a company. So I'm really was pleased when our committee recommended this back to me. I made very, very few changes into the specification that I saw based on my experience. So it does allow us to pick the best vehicle for the town of Barrington. And this is exactly what we did with the emergency 1 ladder vehicle that is being constructed right now.
Great, thank you.
I'll make a motion to award the bid to Specialty Vehicles Incorporated of Plainville, Mass. for the purchase of a new emergency response vehicle replacing the 2006 Rescue number 3 for a cost not to exceed $313,603.
Second.
By Vice President Weymouth and seconded by Councilor Boyajian. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Boyajian.
Aye.
Councilor Breyer.
Aye.
Councilor Hearn.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
The next items on the agenda are ordinances, and the first one is the introduction of ordinance 2020-6. This is an ordinance amendment to Chapter 169 taxation. The purpose of the ordinance will be to change the property tax appeal deadlines to align with Rhode Island general laws. And so the new ordinance specifically references the law rather than putting in dates. Do I hear a motion to introduce 2020-6, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 169 taxation, and set a public hearing for May 4, 2020?
So
moved.
Motion
I'll second.
by Councilor Boyajian, seconded by Vice President Weymouth. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Boyajian.
Aye.
Councilor Breyer.
Aye.
Councilor Hearn.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. The next one, and here I'm opening up the public hearing for ordinance 2020-5. This is an ordinance amendment to Chapter 185 zoning, Article 2 definitions. And if anyone from the public would like to be heard on this, you should unmute your square, and I will look for the ones that are unmuted. Okay, seeing none, no one from the public wishes to be heard on this. How do we feel as a council? Does someone want to discuss it? Are you ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
To adopt 2020-5, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 185 zoning, Article 2, definitions as presented.
Second.
Motion was made by Vice President Weymouth and seconded by Councilor Hearn. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Boyajian?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer?
Aye.
Councilor Hearn?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. I am opening the public hearing into ordinance 2020-8. This is a renewal of the ordinance declaration of emergency pursuant to section 225 of the Barrington Home Rule Charter. Would any member of the public like to be heard on this? If you would like to be heard, please unmute your square and I will look for that. Seeing none, would anyone on the council like to address this state of emergency and the renewal of this? Councilor Breyer.
I just like to say I've been impressed, but not at all surprised by Jim's leadership and the way he's moved things forward. We've been ahead of the curve on a lot of the safety protocols that we put in place regarding social distancing and everything, and I think it's helping protect a lot of people, and I really appreciate it and just wanted to acknowledge that.
Anyone else?
I'll make a motion to adopt 2020-8, renewal of ordinance declaration of emergency pursuant to section 2-2-5 of the Town of Barrington Home Rule Charter.
Second.
Motion made by Vice President Weymouth, seconded by Councilor Boyajian. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
I'll say aye, and I would I agree with everything that Jacob's just said.
Good job.
Aye.
Councilor Boyajian.
I'll say aye, and I'll note that, Jim, I think that's your office you're in right now, isn't it? I hope you get home sometime.
Councilor Breyer.
Aye.
Councilor Hearn.
Aye. I think that's his bunker.
And I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. We're in good hands.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on reallocating $1,575 from the Town Council Contingency Fund for Earth Day, Arbor Day for the purchase of trees and seedlings. And can you tell us about this, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Kate will probably jump in. But and Kate McBride, what's the first name? It's escaping me.
Rick McBride.
Rick McBride did a phenomenal job on getting this thing going. And if you remember last month, he asked for a very specific amount of money to buy bags, reusable shopping bags and ball caps and some seedlings. Unfortunately, we've had to cancel the Earth Day Arbor Day, as Kate mentioned earlier. So I said, well, how much money can you return to the council contingency fund? And his comment was, well, I've already talked to the tree guy and the arborist, and we can use the rest of that money to support the purchase of 13 larger trees that can be planted in town this spring. So with that said, we put this in so that so the council's aware you're not spending any more money, but it's not being spent on ball caps and shopping bags, but it's being spent on trees.
Okay.
And these are good sized trees. Frank was unable to purchase as many or plantable size trees as he had hoped. And he was missing 13. So Rick's point was we can augment that so that he can buy the rest of the good sized trees that will be planted immediately. The seedlings will go into the nursery, just be on the property just beyond the community garden.
Yes, Councilor Breyer.
Kate, have you kept a running tally of the tree count that you've been noting each month, of what we've removed as a town versus planted? Because I think this 13 probably is a good chunk of the deficit. And I'm just curious if you happen to know the number. I haven't added them up.
I have not kept tabs. To DPW's credit, for the last 3 months, it was not, those were not months to plant trees.
Right.
So, but I think with these 13, I think we'll jump back into better numbers pretty soon.
And I think I mentioned last month that these trees will be planted on private property, so they don't become town responsibilities in the out years when it's time to trim them and take them down. Great.
Vice President Weymouth, do you want to make the motion?
I would love to. I'll make a motion to reallocate $1,575 from the Town Council Contingency Fund for Earth/Arbor Day for the purchase of trees and seedlings.
Second.
Motion made by Vice President Weymouth, seconded by Councilor Boyajian. Vice President Weymouth, how do you vote?
An enthusiastic aye.
Councilor Boyajian.
Aye.
Councilor Breyer.
Aye.
Councilor Hearn.
Aye.
I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is to set the agenda for our May 4, 2020 Town Council meeting. This is one of those, I don't know about you guys, but time has seemed to run differently in the past couple of weeks. There are times when I look back and wonder if I did something yesterday or a month ago. And looking ahead is kind of hard too. You know, May 4th may seem like a long way away, but it could get here very quickly. Does anyone have anything in particular they want to add today to this? You certainly can obviously call me during the month or shoot me an email to add something to the agenda. Yes,
Mr. President.
Councilor
I'd
Brown.
like to add a discussion about how a potential way to recognize publicly Pride Month, which is in June, but discussing it in May so that we're ready in advance of the month.
Okay.
Councilor Breyer, perhaps you could research and try and find a resolution that would be an appropriate way to do that?
Yep.
Mr. President, I was going to recommend that we add 0 Seabrook as a discussion for the next council meeting.
Right. Okay.
I think we should have a bad do-it-yourself haircut contest.
As long as you bring that up, Council Boyajian, I was going to mention that every time you speak and I look at your picture, I think I'm looking at Jimmy Kimmel Live.
So there are at least 2 of you sporting new beards.
This is my
When are we
plague
gonna
beard.
what?
This is my plague beard. That's right.
Waiting to see it on Mike and Jim and the Chiefs.
I don't think so.
That's not happening.
Kate, did you have something that you wanted to put on the agenda, or?
I realized that I had asked whether or not the Juvenile Hearing Board, which obviously isn't meeting, but I had asked Mike if they're supposed to nominate presidents or chairs, a chair and vice chair on a yearly basis. which they have not done since I've been associated with them. And in the minutes, it says Town Solicitor Mike Ursillo said that he will research and give an answer at the next council meeting. It's not a big deal, but
I will have an answer for the next meeting. Thank you for reminding me.
Great.
Mike, or Kate, I don't know if it matters, but I do have quite a bit of files on the Juvenile Hearing Board and their bylaws.
We'll touch base, Chief. We'll touch base.
Yes, okay.
Anything else?
I had asked a while back to have an economic development kind of presentation, a discussion, and I do think that kind of giving some time to kind of either a broad kind of look at what's going on in our little local economy might not be a bad idea for next month.
I think that's a great idea, and maybe our economic development, to the extent that they do meet, if they want to meet by Zoom, our economic development committee could address that, and maybe Deborah, you could bring that to their attention.
I believe that was on their agenda for a canceled meeting. So we'll try and get one between now and the next council meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Yes, Councilor Breyer.
Actually, a discussion and maybe some information that would relate to the issues that Ken Block brought up during public comment about ways to potentially ensure that folks who are likely to struggle as a result of the economic factors of this crisis, that we, find ways to not make a bad situation worse possible.
I agree.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm looking at the town map, and it looks like the zoning board review is on both the April 16th and April 22. Do we know when that actually?
Kate, to my knowledge, we're on the 16th.
Okay.
What the 16th is school vacation week, and I was just wondering if that had been changed for that reason.
There's no school vacation week.
Right.
They are having a 4-day weekend over Easter and Passover.
But you think that the zoning board meeting is going to be next 2 weeks?
I'd have to look at, I don't have a calendar in front of me right now, Kate.
Yeah, the 16th. Okay. And that will be a Zoom meeting?
It will. We have a practice set up. I want to have a practice with our solicitor and Caroline to make sure we all understand exactly how it's going to work. We're fairly different from the way your meeting has gone very well. We are not quite so orderly usually because people are asking questions of the applicant, and we're dealing with a lot of paperwork. And so that is a complexity that I want to get ironed out before we get together.
Yeah. The senior services, by the way, their board canceled their upcoming meeting, as well as the juvenile hearing board.
Okay. Anything else? Again, feel free to reach out. We can put things on the agenda if you want to discuss them. I should note, I know Ken Block raised this issue. One of the things that people really should be looking at is the federal help. I've been spending a lot of time looking at that for my company and finding and the payroll protection loans are a wonderful benefit that really is available to a lot of different people. And beginning on this Friday, folks who are sole proprietors will be able to apply for that. 2.5 months of payroll. That's a forgivable loan. So anyway, that. I hope people are looking closely at that because that can really help during this tough time. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. I think this went more smoothly than I expected. And I appreciate your hard work, Mary, in setting this up and running back and forth to Jim's office and making sure it was all working. So thank you very much, everybody.
Good job, Mike.
Good job.
Be safe and be
Good
healthy.
job, Mary.
Good night.
Stay at home.
Good seeing you all.
Yes.
Be well.
Yes.
That was my easiest town sergeant job.